Hi, everybody. Everybody ready? We get started? Awesome. My name is Michael Siglain. I'm the creative director of publishing at Lucasfilm, and welcome to the all-star author panel. We've got about a quarter of the participants up here so far. There's more to come. There's not. This is everyone. It's a lot. We've got 12 amazing authors. We have Mr. Ben Blacker.
Nope.
Ben Acker. I'm so sorry. And it even says Ben Acker, and I told you that wrong. I apologize. Mr. Christian Blauvelt. Hello. Delilah Dawson. Drew Daywalt. You guys are long seats. Mr. Jason Fry. Ms. Claudia Gray. John Jackson Miller. Daniel José Older. Cavan Scott. Mr. Charles Soule. Ms. Elizabeth Wein. Very excited. And last but not least, Mr. Timothy Zahn. All right, so here's how we're going to work it today. We're going to go through and talk to each of the panelists a little bit and then throw them some questions, and hopefully you guys will learn some fun stuff about what we've got coming up with Lucasfilm Publishing. So first and foremost, I'm going to start with Ben. Ben, you're best known for the Thrilling Adventure Hour podcast.
Woo! Thank you both.
What was it like working on a middle grade series you guys are doing, Join the Resistance? Can you talk a little bit about what the series is and what your writing process is like? And
it was great. Join the Resistance, if you haven't read it, is Goonies and Star Wars. It's a bunch of kids join the Resistance, like the title tells you, and they really want to fly the X-Wings, but they're not old enough and screw-ups. And I can relate to at least half of that. And it was really a great opportunity, and we are thankful for it. I speak both for myself and my co-writer, Ben Blacker, who sends his well wishes. And writing a book is so hard. There's so many more words than writing any other thing. So it took that. It took learning a new medium, and that you let us do that.
And what's the process like for you and Ben?
Oh, we drink a lot of coffee.
Okay.
And then we outline together, and then we pass off drafts. So for the first two books, he wrote the first draft, I wrote the second draft. We went back and forth like that. And for the third book, we're changing it up, and I'm writing the first draft. So see if you notice what the first draft probably was like to bring you what the book eventually becomes.
Excellent. And then you guys are also working on a Journey to the Last Jedi comic for Marvel.
Yes.
Called Storms of Crate.
My gosh, you guys, we got to write Luke and Leia and Han Solo and Chewbacca, I think I pronounced it correctly, and Wedge Antilles, all our favorites.
And what was that like, going from a story set around the new trilogy to a story focused on the original trilogy?
It felt like we were home. Like, it was really
Good
great.
Answer.
It was really great. It was like I didn't know how deeply the characters had burrowed in and like lived in me, and then to be able to write them, it was so much fun.
Awesome. Christian, let's talk to you a little bit. You've written a nonfiction Star Wars book.
Star Wars is real, guys. Come on.
Exactly. But what your book was went through the entire saga. So what was it like for you as a writer coming to it and trying to explain the saga to an entirely new audience who maybe wasn't familiar or maybe hasn't seen the films in many years? What was the challenge of that like?
Well, it was so much fun more than anything because it allowed me to, in a way, look at this saga that's been a part of my life for over 2 decades, like from the perspective of a newcomer. It's like, what if I was just being exposed to Star Wars for the first time? And I remember so vividly what it was like watching Star Wars for the first time. It was a VHS tape of A New Hope that I rented from Blockbuster in 1996, right before my 10th birthday. Right before my 10th birthday. And just watching it, you know, in my VCR, it was incredible. And it was, you know, it was such a transformative experience. It really was like taking your first step into a larger world. And so that's a really powerful thing. And so with this book, you know, I'm really hoping that I can have an impact just on guiding people into this universe, bringing them to Star Wars, bringing them to all that this amazing galaxy of storytelling has to offer. You know, it's a pretty cool thing. It's a challenge, though, because it's like, since I've been familiar with Star Wars for decades, it's like, how do you just start with the basics? How do you just start from square one, you know? And you realize, you know, it's pretty challenging, actually, to explain some key concepts like the Force, and, you know, how lightsabers work. And, you know, and there's so many different factions and so many different characters. And so, you know, it's a very basic introduction in a lot of ways. But I know, like, all right, so all of you are massive Star Wars fans here, but you know someone in your life who is not a huge fan, you know? Parents, significant other, friends, your kids, maybe they're just, you know, they haven't gotten into it yet. This book will really be such a great introduction for them.
Awesome. Delilah, we're going to go to you, then we'll jump back to Mr. Daywalt. Let's talk Phasma.
I've heard of her.
You've heard of her? You've written a badass book about a badass warrior. Now, I'm imagining that the writing process was probably cranking up some Joan Jett, throwing on Fury Road in the background, and like diving in head first. Am I close at all?
No, there is a playlist. That's a big part of my process. So there's a playlist. You can find it on Spotify under Delilah S. Dawson. Big surprise, it is 2 Star Wars soundtracks and the Mad Max Fury Road soundtrack. I listen to all of these things on repeat. And then there's like one Foster the People. I don't know what happened, but it's a great song. But yeah, so I think for Star Wars novels, oftentimes the outline is the harder part. And once you get that nailed down, writing the story, you're like, oh, now I get to take off the training wheels and really burn some rubber. So yeah, there was a lot of coffee, there was some bourbon, I would like be writing in bed and have like very violent movies on Netflix playing in the background. Like, you know how when Netflix suggests movies, you choose one and it's like, oh, you might like these. And I'm like, I need very violent things about Vikings that murder people. And it's like, I'm here for you. Watched a lot of Vikings murder a lot of people in a lot of interesting ways. So yeah, that all played into it. Watched some Dune in there. Watched you know, all the different kind of sci-fi, Thunderdome, all sorts of good stuff in there.
And did anything surprise you as you were writing the character? Did anything hit you like, wow, I didn't think of this with her?
I think as I imagine the people who write Hannibal feel similar to how I feel about Phasma, where you're like, I couldn't stop you if I wanted to. She makes her own decisions and she does things. And I got to a point where, like, you guys know this guy? I was just like, please don't kill him. I really got to the point where I was like, I know what has to happen, but I don't hurt my precious babies. But Phasma's going to kill all your precious babies. Or at least maim them. There's no spoilers there. But yeah, it's really fun to write an unrepentantly dark character.
Excellent. All right, now we're going to go to the complete extreme. You have a Phasma book, and from there, with Drew, we have a kid's picture book.
Where BB-8 murders everyone.
Where exactly. Yeah. But
I mean, you should buy it because he kills Phasma.
Spoiler alert!
It's a picture book.
But for your work, though, Drew, I mean, you're kind of also, you know, in addition to your picture books and Day the Crayons Quit and Day the Crayons Came Home, you're also known for your horror shorts, which can be pretty dark and grim.
You would like, by the way.
All right, kill stuff.
You know, what was it like transitioning to say, all right, I'm going to go from horror and really friendly kids' books to a BB-8 Star Wars book?
Well, yeah, I went from being a script doctor for Quentin Tarantino and Tony Scott and all these violent gangster movies to talking crayons for 6-year-olds. And also, I've worked with George Romero and zombies and all this crazy violent stuff, and I do get that question quite a bit. And it's interesting because when they say, well, how can you do both of those things? I say, well, I'm in an arrested state of development at about 7 or 8 years old. You guys are all asking yourselves where you are right now, I know. But I'm about 8 years old as a creative, and everything that was really cool to me, like Star Wars and, you know, Santa Claus and all this great stuff that's magical and real when you're a kid, Well, the flip side of that is so's the boogeyman in the closet and the thing that lives in the backyard. And so it's two sides of the same coin for me. Doing this BB-8 book, actually the most difficult thing about the BB-8 book was that it's actually, are we allowed to use the word canon anymore, or is that not the word?
It's authentic to Star Wars.
It's authentic to Star Wars.
We have to do this. It's canon.
Yeah, it changes every couple years.
No, but your book is the story of what happens to BB-8 between when he says goodbye to Poe on Jakku and hello to Rey.
Yeah, and for me it was a dream come true. I'm like, he's going back to 96. I go to 77. I was in the theater when that was the first movie I ever saw in a movie theater was Star Wars. You too? Yeah, right. And I thought, oh, well, all movies are this good. And I asked my older sister, I'm like, are they all this good? And she's like, they're amazing, yes. And it was like, the next one we saw was Freaky Friday, so that was. But taking the hard part about doing the BB-8 story was, my story begins when Poe says, "Run! You got to get the plans for Luke on Tuano Village," and all these other characters are blowing everything up. And then it's 20 minutes of the movie that wasn't shot. It was basically BB-8's journey through the desert. And the thing that I was up against was my book has to end with Rey rescuing him from Tito, which is the worst thing that can happen to a writer because it's Deus Ex Machina. This is a character he didn't know, he's never met, and suddenly she's rescuing him and solving all his problems. So that was probably the biggest thing to try and tackle, but I think because it fits into the narrative of a larger story, it worked.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Jason, I want to talk to you a little bit. You've done it all. You've written nonfiction for DK. You've written in-world manuals for Studio Fun and ReaderLink. You've written fiction for Disney Lucasfilm Press. How do you switch between all three?
I'm actually really grateful for the chance to switch because it feels like a way of kind of recharging your batteries a little bit, even though you're still getting to work on Star Wars. So I don't know, it's like the fiction part of my brain and the kind of non-fiction fiction part of my brain, they're like different enough that it's a bit of a rest. But I mean, what I think they have in common is it's all still storytelling. It's just kind of a different kind. Like, I mean, sometimes you're just out there with characters of someone else's invention or your own telling a story, and sometimes it's more like you're supporting a story. But in both cases, you're really kind of speaking to a love of Star Wars, whether you're deepening a story or striking out on your own. So I find that the commonalities are helpful, but then, but that chance to kind of switch gears is also really terrific. So I feel very lucky to be able to do both. Do you have a preference, a sweet spot to say, like, oh, I love the fiction comes easiest, or nonfiction is the easiest? I think fiction is where my heart really is, but I mean, it's funny, we're all telling our origin stories, which I think is always interesting with any Star Wars writer, but I mean, I was 8 years old when I saw A New Hope, and it quite literally changed my life. I was someone who was interested in storytelling and had never imagined there would be stories like that, and it just, my horizons just exploded outward. And so, my fiction is where my heart is, but more than that, if it's a Star Wars story, whatever it is, I pinch myself and think, I can't believe I get to do this.
I think we all say that, which is pretty cool. Claudia, let's talk about Leia. You've had the distinction of writing her now pre-Episode 4 and pre-Episode 7. How did Bloodline inform Leia, Princess of Alderaan?
It was interesting to go backwards. Normally, if you're going to write 2 books about a character, you're probably going to write them in chronological order, and this was the exact opposite. But it was interesting for me because one of the most enjoyable things about writing Bloodline was that I was writing a Leia who was just a few years older than I am. And at that point, I hadn't yet seen The Force Awakens. So sort of imagining, okay, she's still this incredible heroine and she's still smart and funny, but she's hit a point where she realizes, okay, not everything is working out as perfectly as I had hoped that it would. And sort of like, you wanna temper that and without taking away the essential courage and bravado of the character. But then for Leia, Princess of Alderaan, I was writing Leia just a few years older than I was when Return of the Jedi came out. And I mean, I was a fan, you know, I was 6 or 7 when I first saw A New Hope, and you know, that was it. My brain had been colonized forever. But it was Return of the Jedi, I was about to be a teenager, and that was when I started like jotting down what I did not yet know was fan fiction. You know, I had big posters from Return of the Jedi up on my doors, you know, and I began making up snatches of stories and things. One little bit of which actually worked its way into Lost Stars, like I was like working in '83. But I guess like it was fun to sort of go back, okay, she's just a few years older than that point when I was sort of like that dreamy and that enthusiastic. And it's a Leia who hasn't sent people to die yet. It's a Leia who hasn't given hard orders. Right. So again, she's still got that core, but she's not quite as tough as she will be even by the time of episode 4.
And as a fan, how much of that story did you already have kicking around in your brain beforehand?
Before you guys came to me?
Yeah.
Actually fairly little. I remember, I think it was Jen. She said, we want you to tell the story of how Leia became involved in the Rebel Alliance. And I said, how did that happen? And she said, you tell me. And I was just like, yes. Oh, yes. Probably the only part that I had in my mind before was that I did have sort of an idea of what her mother would be like, who surprisingly somehow, I mean, what is it, that guy with the ice cream maker in Empire Strikes Back? Like, he had an action figure in a story, and Brea's just like, no idea, you know, I mean, she was really unexplored. So I had an idea in my head of what I would like her to be like and what I thought Bail and Brea's sort of marriage and partnership would be like. So that I did get to draw on some.
Awesome. Awesome. John, let's talk a little bit about your return to a galaxy far, far away. You've got a story in the Canto Bight novella that's coming out just days before
That's right.
The Last Jedi. What can you tell us about that story?
Canto Bight, I have to say, of all the short stories, the novels, the comics, I can now actually deduct my gambling losses as a tax deduction as research, and I have Star Wars Canto Bight to thank for it, because this is the location that's in The Last Jedi, and it's sort of Monte Carlo spelled sideways. It is the planet where the rich and wealthy go to ignore all of the other stuff which is going on in everybody else's books and basically enjoy themselves. And it is a place where people play games constantly every day of their lives. And again, this to me feels like all those years at the off-track betting parlor or in the casino. This is research. This is stuff that I was able to draw upon. This book has 4 novellas in it, and they all interrelate. One by Saladin Ahmed, one by Ray Carson, one by Mira Grant, and I'm kind of doing the anchor leg in this. And with mine in particular, I'm getting to deal with something which you realize it actually is a Star Wars theme in a sense, because you have that tension between science and use the computer, the tracking computer, and then over here you've got use the Force, Luke. Well, where is a place where people are always trying to use science and systems and things to actually become successful? That's in gambling or in gaming or in casinos, and yet we always still want to bet the 7 because we just have that faith that something's going to happen there. And in my story, I have a person who's actually a card counter, a guy with a system, who has his life completely upended by one night with these 3 strange frog-looking guys, and it's kind of a wild ride. To say the least. But again, all of these use characters that are in Last Jedi, and it'll be fun to see all of that on screen as well.
Awesome. Awesome. Daniel, let's talk to you a little bit. Welcome to Star Wars, first and foremost.
Thank you. It's really great to be here.
If folks haven't read Shadow Shaper or Half Resurrection Blues, they really should, because it's really phenomenal stuff. As the new kid on the block, you know, you've contributed to from a certain point of view, as have many of the panelists. But what was your take what was your experience taking that first step into a larger world?
Like everyone said, I mean, it's a cliche at this point on the panel even, but it's a dream come true for sure. For me, Return of the Jedi was either the first or one of the first movies that I saw on the big screen. Totally changed my life. And I was obsessed with dewbacks when I was a kid, like most kids. Like all kids, really, I think. And for those of you that don't know, dewbacks are those giant lizards in the background in Tatooine. And this was before they were added in, even more, right? This is when you could just see them like flashing past for a second. And so, to me, that was always such an amazing sign of world building that was happening very early on in that series, is that they had this whole like other squad of stormtroopers riding around on giant dinosaurs that we don't even get to really hear about what they are. This was the days before the Wikipedia, so you couldn't just go and look it up. So that's why my story ended up being about a stormtrooper who's basically me, who was obsessed with dewbacks too. It was very easy to write.
That's awesome. And you got to record the audio for your portion of the audiobook, correct?
Yes, I like to hear myself talk. So it worked out really well.
Excellent, thank you. Cav, let's talk to you about Star Wars Adventures and Adventures in Wild Space. Obviously, if Adventures is in the title, we have to give it to you, that's in your contract. So with the two, can you tell us what the connection is, first and foremost, and how you approach them differently? Or did you approach them differently?
So Adventures in Wild Space is a series of books for kids, sort of like 8, 9, 10-year-olds, which is it's created its own little part of the Star Wars universe, set just after Episode 3 and sort of before Episode 4. So it's in that period when everyone thinks the Empire's a really good idea. And a bunch of kids find out, no, it's not. And then Star Wars Adventures is a new all-age comic from IDW, which came out a couple of weeks ago. There is a link in the two that the Graff children, who are the heroes of Adventures in Wild Space, their grandson, or one of the children's grandson, is now appearing as the narrator in Star Wars Adventures, telling stories he's learned. And so you've got that nice little, it's that mad thing of creating a dynasty. Going from right back to the early days of the Empire, now to the Resistance era. So yeah, that's really cool. For me, the most exciting thing is that we've all given our origin stories now, so I'm going to do mine as well. Mine was comics, and mine was Star Wars comics, because I just between Star Wars and Empire Strikes Back, I picked up an issue of Star Wars Weekly in the UK, which reprinted the old Marvel comics. So that was how I was introduced to the characters. I was introduced to the characters by my grandma buying me an Obi-Wan figure at Christmas, and I had no idea who this was. So I got very excited. What have you bought me? You've bought me an old man. Thanks, Grandma. But then obviously through the comics I found out who Obi-Wan was. And so for me, that was my entry point into Star Wars. And I think comics for kids of that age are really important to get them in, because they're the next generation of people coming to cons like this. And to have Star Wars there, And the best thing about Star Wars Adventures has been having parents tweeting pictures of their kids at bedtime, reading it. It's become their ritual, they're reading Star Wars Adventures. But for me, that's the most important thing.
That's awesome. We're going to speak to Charles quickly, because I know you have to run. Can you say where you're going?
Yeah, I've been summoned by Luke Skywalker to Octo. He apparently has some notes on the Darth Vader comic. I'm gonna get to go meet Mark Hamill, and I know that is a drag to leave the panel halfway, but I'm not gonna miss this. And I think any of you would do the same. But before I go, I wanna. First of all, thank all of you who have been reading the Poe Dameron and the Darth Vader comics that I've been doing. Thank you very much. It's a blast to get to write them. My Star Wars origin, I was born a long time ago, galaxy far, far away, But just really quickly, I want to ask one thing. So I'm going to ask you to cheer for either Poe or Vader, and I want to see which one gets more love in the room, right? So, okay, so first, Poe Dameron. Yeah, he's pretty great. I really like him. Now, we know what's going to happen probably, but let's just see. All right, Darth Vader. Now the thing that's been funny for me about writing these books is that Darth Vader is a monster, right? He is an evil, horrible, baby-killing beast. He's done like, he's done a lot of bad things in the movies. He does awful things in my comic, but yet we love this guy. And that was my biggest sort of challenge or risk or thing that I was worried about before I started writing the book. Like, how can I write a book about this thing? And then I'm writing the book, and now I kind of get it, you know? It's kind of like I put a lot of whatever negative feelings or darkness I might have goes into the Darth Vader book, so I'm not pulling out my lightsaber, doing something, you know, whatever. But it's like, I don't know, it's been amazing to write that book and sort of see why he works so well for all the readers and everybody. So, yeah, so thank you again. I'm going to go meet Luke Skywalker. I hope you'll keep reading my stuff.
Thank you, Charles. All right, thank you, sir. Next up is Ms. Elizabeth Wein. Elizabeth, it's an honor to have you here with us today. You're best known for award-winning and critically acclaimed novels, Codename Verity and Rolls Under Fire.
Sorry, I'm a fangirl.
You also have a very unique perspective in that you are a pilot. And I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about that and how that played into your writing for Cobalt Squadron. And watch what you say, because you can't give too much away.
Sorry, what was the last thing you said?
Just watch what you say, because you can't give too much away.
Oh, right, because I can't actually talk about Cobalt Squadron. So I'll talk about flying. Actually, I'm a very fair weather pilot. I kind of feel like a bit of a newbie, even though I have had my license for something ridiculous now, like 15 years. And when I started flying, all I wanted to do was write about flying, which is why I stopped writing Arthurian sort of pseudo-fan fiction and started writing World War II novels. And I watched all the movies, all the same movies that inspired Star Wars, and I read a lot of books, and I learned to fly. And I think that the grittiness of it, actually, when you're training as a private pilot, I mean, I have a private pilot's license, I'm not a commercial pilot, you are totally focused on getting back down to the ground safely. And an awful lot of what you do is just going through the emergency procedures again and again and again. So when I was learning to fly, I lived in a constant state of panic, because doing these emergency procedures are for me, the most terrifying part of the whole process. And the first time after I got my license and I kind of went up by myself and I'm like flying along, and every 15 minutes you're kind of doing your checks and you're like, oh, my engine's not on fire. Oh gosh, I'm not in a spiral dive. I'm not stalling. I don't have to land without power. Nothing's going wrong. And it was kind of a surprise. So I think all that fear really I put into my books, not just my World War II books, but also this one. And also what was really, really fun about this one was getting to write about bomber pilots, because all my other pilots are like ferry pilots. So being able to actually have a group working together, having a team working together was a lot of fun.
Excellent.
I didn't tell you my origin story, and I won't, but I will say that when I was approached about this book, it was like 11:30, because I live in Scotland when this email came in, and I was inarticulate with joy. Mm-hmm. And my 17-year-old was sitting in the living room, and I went in and I went, Star Wars! Star Wars! Yeah, so I'm really pleased to be on this panel.
I got to say, it was the same thing for us, because at the office, we said, well, who could write? We knew we wanted to do a story that focused on the bomber squadron. So coming out of Last Jedi, if you wanted to know more about it, you would have a novel, much like we did with Force Awakens with Before the Awakening. And there really was only one author on the list. And we just said, oh, we'll never get her, and you were it. And amazingly, it all worked out, and we have a fantastic book out of it. So thank you for all of your hard work. Last and certainly not least, Mr. Timothy Zahn. You've had a profound impact on Star Wars literature over the years. What's it been like to write Thrawn then and now?
Probably the biggest difference is when Heir to the Empire was published, nobody knew if there was any interest out there in Star Wars anymore. Seriously, everything had been 8 years since the last movie. The fans were very quiet. We found out later they were quiet because there was nothing for them to glom onto. But I mean, people waiting in anticipation looks exactly like people who don't care anymore. At least from a certain point of view. So the big difference is that back then, this was a test. This was a, does anybody care? Are there fans out there? Which the answer to was a resounding, oh yes. Now coming back to Thrawn, it's like coming back to just an old friend. People say, is it hard to pick up the character and write him again? No, not really. I understand him very well. I understand how to write for him. The difference now is we know the audience is out there, and which on some level makes it a little more nerve-wracking because they have expectations and I've got to meet those.
Excellent.
Also, there are two schools of thought. One is that I am the old dog who can learn new tricks. The other is that I'm the bad penny they cannot get rid of.
All right, everyone, we're going to do a quick lightning round. So this is for anyone who wants to answer this one. Does anyone have a favorite line of dialogue, description, anything that you've written? They're like, man, that was just either super cool to write or I just love it for some reason. Go right ahead.
I have one, and I cannot give you the full context of it because it's upcoming and semi-secret, but I got to write a page of a comic book in which I got to describe for the artist, Wedge Antilles is in berserker mode. His shirt is torn, he's covered in blood, none of it his. His enemy at his feet, and he's yelling at them, I was on Red Squadron. We killed the Death Star. You come after Wedge Antilles, you better bring a Star Destroyer baby.
Anybody top that one?
The dialogue isn't that impressive of it on its own, but back in Lost Stars, you know, it's telling the story of people who aren't the big hero or the big villain. You know, they're just average Imperial pilot, average X-Wing fighter. What do they think is going on? And Thane is there at the briefing for the Battle of Endor, and he's like, yes, this strike mission will be led by General Soule. And he's like, who is that? And they're like, yeah, you joined after Hoth, didn't you? You wouldn't know about that. You joined around Hoth, didn't you? You wouldn't know him. And he's like, what the? Then they're like, and this will be done by General Calrissian. And he's like, who is that? You know, it's like, they're turning this whole thing over to people I've never heard of, you know, fine. But I just loved that because it was a moment to really stress, like, yeah, this person isn't anywhere near the core of the story that we see in the movies. And if you were just an average X-Wing pilot who hadn't been at the very first of it, that had to be a really confusing and probably slightly disconcerting meeting.
I suppose for me, it's for my story from a certain point of view, which I wrote the Obi-Wan story, which is told, Obi-Wan's death told by Obi-Wan during the death, which I pitched. I thought that would be a really cool idea, and they went, how do I write that? And the opening line, which was the one that was released on the little cards, is, my name is Ben Kenobi, and I'm dead. I know how that sounds. Crazy old Ben with his crazy old stories. But this is real. This is happening. At least I think it is. Because it's that sense of confusion that Ben has at the beginning of Star Wars, that everything is sort of coming back. And that's what I was trying to get. But I sort of wrote those words, and then I had to go away and think, well, how do I tell the rest of the story from that point on? But I did like that moment.
All right, since you're all fans, if, for argument's sake, I was planning upcoming Star Wars books, as fans...
Are we pitching right now?
What would you like? I didn't say would you like to write. What would you like to see as a fan?
Revenge of the Dewback. I think that would be good. Whatever.
Oh man, I've thought so much about stuff I want to write. It's like, what do I want to read?
Yeah, what do you want to read? Not write. That's a separate conversation. We'll have that conversation later.
Have those off then.
I would like to read the story of Boba Fett trying to get from Cloud City back to Tatooine with every other bounty hunter in the sector trying to get on his ship and nick Han back from him to go get the reward. That could be a very interesting, fun story. And yes, I'm pitching.
I'm not pitching, but that's reminded me of something. There was a Star Wars exhibit when my kids were, this was about 15 years ago. They had a bunch of costumes on exhibit in the Edinburgh City Art Galleries, which I went to see, and they had Boba Fett's costume. And like hanging off his shoulder was this sort of blonde braid. I want to know where that came from.
All right.
Look at us all jumping at this. Do you see that?
Right?
Yeah.
I would like to read something that tells us everything that Chewbacca and R2-D2 said. They must be the most sarcastic jerks in Star Wars. And I want to hear R2-D2's running commentary on Dagobah, like, you brought me to a swamp planet? Great. Great. When he's throwing up mud from his eye, that's got to be the dirtiest Star Wars fiction.
It's in all the Kurosawa films, I think, actually.
I think that's all covered in the Shakespearean versions. R2 has asides.
I'm having trouble thinking of a Star Wars book I would not want to write because I'm like, no, let me do them all. Honestly, one of the only ones I don't want to write but that I desperately want to read is about Kylo Ren's fall. I think that's the only one I want to read so badly that I'm like, no, somebody else has to do that.
I actually, with all the talk of AI in the news, I would actually like to see what would happen if a droid discovered it could use the Force. That would be interesting. Ooh. Because then it's...
Skippy the Jedi droid.
Well, it just brings up so many questions that we unfortunately have to answer. But...
if you're getting onto forbidden topics, like, what really happened to those boffins?
Many died, just leave it at that. Let's talk a little bit about stuff that we've got coming soon. Daniel, I know you're working on probably one of the coolest projects that we have coming up next year. What can you tell the crowd about what you're doing?
Lots of fascinating things.
Can you tell us?
No.
Can you tell us any of the characters?
I can tell you about what I would have to kill them. I can tell you that. I feel like everyone's always writing in a galaxy that's like here or just relatively close. This one is like really far away.
When is it?
No? What? Oh, when? Oh, well, I'm tired of these contemporary things. Like this is just. So I thought, a long time ago. Yeah, something different. So yeah, there you go.
All right, great. Thank you so much.
All right.
Thank you.
We will look forward to something coming from you next year, said a long time ago in a galaxy far, far away.
Quite.
All right.
Yes.
Excellent. Also coming up next year, we have The Last Jedi novelization from Mr. Jason Fry, coming out from our friends at Del Rey. Jason, I think I know the answer, but is there anything you can say about this novel?
No.
That is the correct answer. That is the correct answer. But it's going to be awesome. Other stuff that we've got coming up next year, we have a really fun book coming out from our friends at DK called Star Wars Maker Lab. This follows in the footsteps of the coding projects book that they did earlier this year. Earlier this week, actually, it came out on Tuesday. But this is another way to bring the STEM and STEAM initiatives to kids with Star Wars, and this will be out in July of next year. And we're really excited about doing books like this. Another thing for kids coming early next year is a Forces of Destiny 5-issue miniseries from our friends over at IDW. This is beautiful Leia art from Elsa Charretier. I'm probably massacring her name, so I apologize. But the art is fantastic. Anyone who will be at the IDW panel tomorrow will hear more about this one. Mr. Zahn, would you like to talk about anything?
Am I allowed to?
I think you're allowed to say what's coming next summer.
Thrawn will make another appearance. We don't have a cover yet, but I believe the title is going to be Alliances. The really difficult part about something like this is once you have done Thrawn in a book, where do you go from there? How do you up the game? What can you do to make it even better? Any suggestions, Michael?
I have a suggestion. Could we add a special guest?
Oh, and who would that be?
How about this guy?
That's a great idea.
Isn't that a good idea?
Yes. And just to make it clear, no, I'm not writing this book. I turned it in 2.5 weeks ago.
Oh, hey, that's right.
It's done. It'll be out in July, so stay tuned for more news on the Thrawn sequel. And then last but not least, speaking of Darth Vader, we have celebrated writer-author Adam Rex, who's done some amazing kids' picture books. And next July, he's going to ask the age-old question, are you scared, Darth Vader? And as you can see, Darth Vader fears nothing. So we're about to wrap up the panel. I just wanted to thank everyone, all of you for coming out, all of you for doing just amazing work on the novels, on the comics. We'll keep making them if you guys keep reading them. We do listen. We want to hear what you guys like, what you're digging. And we also want to celebrate the folks here. So in addition to Star Wars, right at the end, if you guys want to just go down the line and mention, other stuff that you guys are working on so that they can share in the love of your excellent work. Ben?
Right now, I think just Star Wars right now. Keep your eyes open. Follow me on Twitter, BNACKER. There will be announcements soon, but I have secret things to announce.
Secret Star Wars things to announce?
Secret Star Wars things, secret other things, but
Okay.
I can't plug other things. I can only plug Star Wars. Read our second Escape from Vodron came out this week, book 2 of Join the Resistance. So you invited me to plug something else, and I'm going to throw it right back in your face and plug Star Wars. Read my Star Wars. It's Star Wars. It's great.
Yeah, right now it's mostly Star Wars for me as well. I know, good man. But keep following. I'm at CT Blauvelt. It's a tricky name, I know. It's at CTBLAUVELT. And you never know, something might happen in the near future that you guys may enjoy.
Very cool. So is this just Star Wars or anything?
No.
Oh, okay. Well, I have one called Sleepy the Goodnight Buddy. About the worst teddy bear in the world.
I can't tell from that if it's a kid's book or a horror book.
You'll have to see.
Why not both?
Yeah.
So I'm online everywhere at Delilah S. Dawson. If you follow me on Twitter, eventually there's always interesting news happening. But if you like the murderous woman aspect of Phasma, I write a series called the Shadow series. It starts with Wake of Vultures. It's Lonesome Dove meets Buffy the Vampire Slayer with monsters. Yes, hello. So the third book is out on Halloween. It's written under a pseudonym, Lila Bowen. And then with Del Rey, I'm co-writing a series with Kevin Hearn called Kill the Farm Boy that they're saying is like Discworld meets Princess Bride. So that's cheer yourself up after all the murder.
And you might also have some top secret stuff down the line, perhaps.
Maybe.
Perhaps.
I'm Jason C. Fry on Twitter. I'm not Jason Fry on Twitter. That's this very nice UK mobile programmer who's actually a big Star Wars fan and better looking than me and nicer, so follow him too. But I'm the C. I also write a series called The Jupiter Pirates, which is a YA series about a family of space pirates. And It's not Star Wars, but as you might imagine, it has some Star Wars DNA, for quite a bit of it, in fact. So I'm going back to that series next year, and also working on some Star Wars stuff, which I can't tell you about, or Pablo and/or Mike would kill me.
Yeah.
I've seen them do it. It's hideous. I am currently figuring out my online presence, but you can always find me at my website, which is claudiagray.com, Gray with an A. If you like space opera, and I'm just going to guess from your presence here that you do, my most recent YA novel is Defy the Stars. All right, thank you. It is, a librarian described it as Battlestar Galactica meets Casablanca, and the only thing I don't like about that description is that I did not come up with it. And the origin of the story was literally, what if the movie Prometheus didn't suck? So yeah, if you like artificial life forms becoming sentient and scientists who know not to put their face down in exploding alien eggs, then this is the book for you.
Don't know if I can mention it in this room, but I wrote a Star Trek trilogy that wrapped up. And so if you want to see me do a third of a million words on Klingons, the kapla. I've been doing some more comics lately. I have a couple of issues of Halo that are in the new Halo Rise of Atriox series. The first issue of mine comes out this month. And then I'm doing some more comics. What's it called? Star Wars Adventures,
I think you may be contributing to?
My
Yes.
first Star Wars comics in 5 years. And also the first time in, gosh, about 100 assignments where I've ever been able to write Luke and Leia and the droids. So that's fun to do for IDW, and that'll be scheduled here at some point.
Excellent.
I'm DJ Older on Twitter, which has led people to think that I play music in nursing homes. And they're very disappointed when they find out that I just write fantasy novels. But I just 2 weeks ago put out Shadow House Fall, which is the follow-up to the New York Times bestselling book, Shadow Shaper, a young adult urban fantasy. Thank you. My adult urban fantasy series is called The Bone Street Roomba, comes out from Rock Books, part of Penguin. Next year I begin the middle grade adventure, which I can't tell you anything about either, but it's amazing. Thank you.
So basically, I'm trying to keep my to-do list the same it was when I was 10. So I'm also working on Doctor Who at the minute. Thank you. This week sees the launch of Dalek, which is the official Honest Gov history of the Daleks is an in-universe thing, trying to work out how a creature that has 3 different origin stories just really has one that's all 3 at the same time. So that comes out, I've co-written that with George Mann and Justin Richards, and I'm currently working on the Missy Chronicles. Missy, if we love Darth Vader, we probably love Missy as well. This is the stories of what Missy does when the Doctor's not around, which is usually bad. So we're working on that at the minute.
Well, I mean, I guess I ought to sort of, say I'm the author of Codename Verity, because that's basically the book that changed my life. But stop.
Keep doing it. No one can
But
stop
my
me.
most recent book, the one that was published this year, is actually a prequel to Codename Verity, and it has nothing to do with science fiction. It has nothing to do with planes. It's a kind of straight-up 1930s drawing room murder mystery, featuring the one of the heroes of Codename Verity as her younger self. And I'm working on middle grade nonfiction about Soviet women combat pilots in World War II.
Cool.
Which doesn't have a title yet.
I'm on Facebook. My 9th Cobra book comes out in January. 3rd Manticore Ascendant book with David Weber comes out in March. The 2nd Sybil's War book from Tor comes out late in summer, and of course Thrawn Alliances, also in summer.
All right, that is it for the panel today. Again, on behalf of everyone up here, thank you. Thank you for reading. Thank you for supporting what we do. We are very, very lucky to do what we do, and it's because of you guys. So thank you. Enjoy the rest of the show, and may the force be with you. Thanks, everybody.